Hello, everyone. Okay. Oh, we got sound going on. Don't need that happening. Um, Hi. Hey, Kiliagon. Um, all right, everyone. So for the first 15 minutes or so, maybe 10. Hi. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Um, yeah. So we're gonna let people kind of filter in. I'm not quite sure. Maybe when we reach 5 people, I'm not quite sure how. Um, we when we get a good feel for how many people are gonna be here, but um, I'm excited for everyone to learn today. It warms my heart to know that you guys are here to watch and to learn. And of course, we have the donation portion of tonight to support Stop AAPI Hate, which, hi! um, we're very excited to be donating today. This is through Tiltify, which is like an extension, and it will donate directly to the organization. So I'm very proud. I'm very excited. And I have a whole presentation set up for today. But today is the week, um, since the shooting in Atlanta. And I felt, of course, it affects me personally. Um, and this event really is just the culmination of multiple different issues that kind of converge together all and to a peak. And so tonight is also to commemorate, to mark that as well. So just keep that in mind. Um, I think that the Asian American community, AAPI community, was obviously very affected by this. Culturally, I think we all kind of took a step back for years. Um, and this kind of brought to light a lot of uh, xenophobia that we ignored for the most part. And I think our society has kind of let run rampant and unchecked. And so I think today, that's kind of the goal, is to kind of meet that head on. So well, it looks like we've got 6 people here. I mean, that's more than I expected, truly. So thank you all so much. Also, there will be a questions portion at the end of this. I'm anticipating this presentation maybe will take an hour. I really have no idea. I didn't really time it, but I don't imagine, it always goes faster than you anticipate. But yes, there will be a question portion. Feel free to submit them to the chat. We will have the moderators put them into a list and I will pull them up later. And then we will go through them one by one. There's no such thing as like a weird question. If anything, ask the stereotypical questions that maybe you were taught. Maybe it's something that you're like, this is a stereotype, but I want to know where it's from. But keep it respectful, as always. And, let's keep it coming from a genuine place. But yeah. So we're going to go to the next slide. Let's make sure that I'm on that slide. Oh, there we are. All right. So, disclaimer, I do not speak for the AAPI community as a whole. I can only speak on my experiences. This is something that a lot of people of color and anybody, member of any community, should not be looked to as like the end all be all. It can be, kind of detrimental to different groups of people if one person is speaking on behalf. And you should always take into account how someone as an individual feels. Some may be upset over different things. So, again, I am not the spokesperson, nor should I be. I can only speak on my experiences, my observations. My links will be provided below for fact checking. Um, I encourage everyone to read these articles yourself so you can draw your own conclusions. And for accountability, I'm not perfect. I wrote this really late at night, so who knows, maybe I got some facts wrong, or maybe I omitted some facts that probably should have been in here. And also because these articles are really interesting, um, they do hit close to home, but they do also, they're very eye-opening. And of course, I could never do justice condensing it all into one presentation. The eloquency of people's writing, and I can't fully convey some of that emotion as well. Again, submit your questions in the chat. Moderators will compile them, and I will address them in a final segment, and 100% of proceeds will go to Stop AAPI Hate. Please use the Tiltify link to donate, and we will tally it at the end of the stream. So let's go. Alrighty. Ground rules, both here and beyond. We're going to start off. Be kind. I am sharing some of the scariest moments of my life. Any hateful comments will be dealt with by the moderators. And I know them personally. They will take it personally. What is up for debate? Opinions, right? We've all seen that one post. It's like, we can disagree about pizza toppings, but we cannot disagree on racism. Okay? What is not up for debate is history, facts, and how these have affected my and others' life. You can't debate whether or not something is factual. You can only debate using said facts, right? To support an opinion. So when someone is sharing their life experiences, that is a fact. They experienced that. When someone is retelling history, maybe it's something you weren't taught. History is taught through the eyes of the winners, of the oppressors, right? And you have to look at history as a culmination of multiple stories in order to learn, right? And to make sure that things aren't repeated. And so we are here today to learn said history so that we can make better decisions in our lives and to, corny as it is, make the world a better place. Alrighty. Terms we should know. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things, and they all refer to these, they all involve these terms. So we should discuss them, what they mean, and then when you have important conversations, you can be well informed, right? And to make sure that nobody gets confused and there's misunderstanding. So intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categories such as race, class, gender, applied to a given individual or group, and creating an overlapping and interdependent system of discrimination or disadvantage. So, for example, while I am Asian, I am also an Asian woman, right? So I don't just experience Asian issues, but I also experience women issues. For example, a white woman has the privilege of being white, but she also has the disadvantage of being a woman, right? And that creates very different experiences based on those different combinations. So it's important to take into account intersectionality when we look at different issues. And that way, we can see that there are nuances and different reasons that things happen. See where I'm going here? Yeah. So, privilege, I mentioned that. A special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. Something that I have noticed a lot of people get uncomfortable with the idea of privilege. And they think that privilege is only afforded to, in terms of race. And while that is true, people do have racial privilege, such as being white. I also have racial privilege over arguably more disenfranchised groups, right? But at the same time, I have I have disability privilege. I have physical disability privilege. I'm able to walk. I don't have to worry about using a wheelchair. Um, I can see. I have all my faculties. And that plays into intersectionality because let's say I was a white woman, but I was disabled. And that adds another element to their experience, right? So it's important to recognize that while you may have disadvantages and you may be um, looked at differently, discriminated against based on different elements of your personality, of your being, you also may embody privilege in other ways that you may not realize. So it's good to check in with yourself, understand that, and it helps you to be a little bit more understanding and empathetic towards other people, right? So like for example, I never thought about how the fact I have like language privilege, right? So many groups of people around the world learn English in order to improve their place in life, and it's a very widely used language. Well, I was lucky that I grew up speaking it, so I have language privilege. Prejudice versus privilege versus racism versus discrimination. These are really important. So prejudice is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason actual experience. This is different from racism. Racism is prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed against a person, group, based particularly on different elements. Typically, in the form of policy, is a very important thing. So, someone cannot be racist if they are not in a position of power, but they can be prejudiced. That is important. So when people say like, oh, so and so, such groups of people can't be racist, this is true if they cannot enact ways to discriminate against somebody else, but they can be prejudiced against other people. So, for example, you can have an opinion about it that is problematic, but you can't enact change because you're not in a position of power. Okay? Erasure, erase, right? The removal of writing, recorded material, or data. Erasure is extremely important when it comes to Asian American issues. Our history has been erased from history books, and that's why we're going to get into the history of AAPI and how it led us to where we are, right? Everybody, a stereotype is that we are doing fine, the model minority myth. And that simply is not true. And because of erasure, I'm sure we all have also kind of felt a little uncomfortable for reasons we may not understand why, that Asian Americans have not been reported as much about, and they're not typically talked about as much. We are a very small population compared to the larger whole. But, people don't know about certain policies, things that happened in the past, and that is by design. Alrighty, I'm glad that we learned those terms. So now we know what I mean when I'm going to be talking about other events and why it's important, right? Alrighty. Why do we need to talk about this? So the events in Georgia, in Atlanta, was a result of many different issues coming to a head. Fetishization, stereotypes, erasure, and the model minority myth, amongst others, sexism, things like that. And that is intersectionality, right? It's multiple different elements layering on top of each other to create a unique situation, a unique take on different experiences, right? Asians in the US have a very different history that is not covered. And this erasure of our experiences removes the ability for our country to learn from our past and recognize the problems we face. In explaining to others why this event is a hate crime, our community needs to explain the history behind it, right? Because people weren't taught that. So that's why we're here. Okay. So how this talk is going to flow is we will be connecting with history and how it resurfaces and manifests in today's society, affects how we speak, and creates systems of oppression. And then finally, we will see how we can break these cycles in the name of being anti-racist. How is activism in this space different from others? So erasure is the number one barrier that we face. People don't talk about it. It's important that we combat that by talking about it, um, posting about it, any sort of way that you can get the word out or educate people on us being seen. So not only does it make us invisible, but it further divides other groups of color through stereotypes that perpetuate white supremacy. Since our history and issues are different, the activism will be different. What we will do is 1. Fight microaggressions that perpetuate harmful stereotypes, educate others on AAPI history to combat erasure and dispel social constructs that hurt other minority groups, and continue to be allies of other movements, BLM, in pursuit of our mutual goal of combating white supremacy. So we are all on the same page. Okay, microaggressions and words we don't use anymore. So this is, just an explanation of what the Asian community doesn't want to see anywhere. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. And maybe I'll dive into why some of these are problematic, but just know that they're incorrect and it leads to our erasure, if that makes sense. Have you eaten dog? Bad driving. Asking Asians about Asian countries, assuming and speaking a language at them, which assumes their background. I've had people come up to me and ask me, just out of the blue, konnichiwa. I'm not Japanese, so that's a problem. Um, there are also, I want to say, like 40 plus countries in Asia. There are so many different languages, so many different cultures that this puts us in a monolith. Like we aren't all Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and we don't all look the same, right? Related to our eyes, peripheral vision. Do you have peripheral vision? How do you see? Eyes, your eyes disappear. They're small or the eye pulling. Now, I don't know about you, but my eyes are pretty big, so incorrect. But also it's rooted in caricatures and it's extremely problematic, right? We don't use caricatures anymore. We talk about blackface, we talk about yellowface, and it's reminiscent of that. And it also you don't want to exacerbate those problems, correct? So you all look alike, which is incorrect as well. But it also perpetuates that stereotype of us all being these uniform robots. And, our lack of personality, we just do math and science. And it removes our individuality. I won't lie, I was good at math, but I wasn't great at math. And it removes the kaleidoscope of what other people can be, right? You don't want someone to put you in a box about what you can and cannot be. It's not nice. So let's just not do it. Disgusted Asian food. Let's not judge other people's food. Assumptions about what a typical Asian looks like. Or, wow, your English is so good, you don't have an accent. You're not even Asian. Things like this, mocking accents and languages. All of these are very disrespectful, and I hope that we all understood that. But if we are to put it under an umbrella, it is because it removes our individuality, its assumptions about where we're from, and it perpetuates the forever foreigner idea, right? Which we'll get into the history of that, but it's the idea that because you're Asian, you can't possibly be a US citizen first, right? Okay, we're continuing. Cultural appropriation. It contributes to the dehumanization through creating an identity into a wearable object. That's my definition or whatever you want to call it, but it means that this person is no longer a full human being that cannot be a costume. It's now something that is an object, it's tangible. And just by putting it on, you now have become said person. It's an oversimplification, it's dehumanizing, right? You're pretty for an Asian girl. That's rude. Let's not do that either. And anything having to do with penis size or emasculation. All right? None of these things are true. And it is designed to put people down and then also build others up. We're not gonna do that. I know that wasn't eloquent, but it's hard to talk about some of these things. Words we don't use. Exotic. There's way more Asian people, okay, in the world. You guys are exotic now. But exotic, ethnic, oriental, Chinaman, Asian slurs, the like. I'm not going to use those words today unless I absolutely have to, or it has to do with a historical event. Same as how you don't use other slurs, same as how you don't use other words. The correct word is Asian when we're talking about in general, or Pacific Islander. And if you want to refer to their background or you want to talk about it, then you ask that person. All right? Same as how with a white person. Right. Ethnic physically hurts. Yes. It's like, ugh. I'm not, no. I'm like, it's a cringe moment, right? Like, you don't want to, if someone says something like that to me, like, do you really want to be that person that makes someone feel that way? Let's use the correct terminology, right? But yeah, so we're not going to use these words anymore. We're going to treat people as people. And same as how if someone were to assume like, oh, I'm going to call all people that look like this Irish, right? But let's say you're not. Say you're very proud of your French heritage. I'm half Danish, okay? If someone said that I was Swedish, ooh, no. Big difference. It's the same thing. Everybody's very proud of their heritage, as they should be, and you should be. And it's disrespectful to just automatically assume that someone is not. Okay, continuing on. Okay, meat and potatoes of tonight, we're going to be talking about Asian history because I don't think that many of us have gotten a taste of this in our history books. I know that we kind of glossed over the Japanese internment, and that was probably it, right? Maybe they mentioned Transcontinental Railroad, but other than that, history is told by the winners, right? So I hope my fellow AAPI that are here today can feel seen, and maybe you will all learn something as well, and we can be like, that's our heritage and stuff. And I hope that the allies that are here today are going to learn about how Atlanta came to be, the events in Atlanta came to be based on the history that has happened here and how it has culminated in multiple different issues that ended up causing this horrific event. Okay, moving on. So, first, the Chinese were brought as a replacement cheap labor after slavery. Through policy and propaganda, Asian people and anyone that looked Chinese, people really didn't care about being specific because, were dehumanized strategically, which we are still affected by today. So in 1852, first Chinese laborers landed in Hawaii. 1854, People versus Hall. Chinese, anyone that looked Chinese, could not testify against a white person. That's important. You can't defend yourself in a court of law, right? 1865, Chinese are recruited to build Transcontinental Railroad. It's important to mention that for every 2 miles of track laid, a Chinese person died. A Chinese man died. That was recorded, okay? So countless more were not taken into account in that number. 1870, Naturalization Act, post-Civil War, allows African naturalized citizenship, which was still basically impossible. Denied citizenship to Chinese and barred Chinese Asian women to immigrate to the US due to the assumption that they were prostitutes. What this does, right, by removing the ability for Asian women to come here and establishing the stereotype that they are all prostitutes, creates a dangerous assumption about the, especially back then with the way that prostitution was treated, a dangerous assumption about Asian women, right? It also was very detrimental to the community because there were all these men here that were by themselves, right? And obviously that took a toll on the community. 1871, largest mass lynching in U.S. history. A dispute resulted in a white man being killed, and 17 Chinese men were hung, about 10% of the Chinese population in LA at the time. At the time, I think there were maybe 6,000 people living in LA. It wasn't very big, obviously. It was early and in California. But yes, largest mass lynching in U.S. history. So, something to think about. That's been recorded. Another important thing to mention. Okay, 1875, the Page Act. First restrictive immigration law in U.S. barred Chinese women for population control. That's a quote. Population control. Again, dehumanizing language. Very important to note the way that they were talked about, and definitely establishes a mental, a stigma, right, around Asian people amongst the powerful, which are the white people in society. 1878, here's the word, Orientals are ineligible for citizenship and unfit to participate in government. So we weren't even allowed to be, I think, kind of a given based off of how they spoke about them earlier. They weren't allowed to be involved in where decisions were being made. This is also just after, I think this is now about 10 years post-Civil War. So 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the only law in U.S. history banning immigration to one ethnic group. Okay, this lasted 60 years and was lifted in 1943, which allowed a quota of 105 Chinese people per year. This Exclusion Act was updated multiple times with different immigration acts. Immigration Act of 1917, National Origins of 1974, 1933 case ruled in, 1934 Tiding-McDuffie Act, which added quotas and further bans on other countries such as the Philippines, Japan, and Hindus. I apologize for not capitalizing Philippines. I wrote this at 3 in the morning. Yeah, all right. But it's important that we mention that this was a very detrimental act, right? Especially for the people that were still here um, in the US that were from Asia. Uh, my relatives immigrated here after this was lifted. Um, so this was very important and very if it really affected my family's own history. So again, the only exclusion act banning immigration to one ethnic group. It's very targeted. It's very important. And accompanying all of these different events were things called yellow peril, which was propaganda that was showing caricatures of Asian people as being evil, stealing your children, terrible things, right? It's important to know that that was the history back then, and that's how people depicted us. 1898 Treaty of Paris, colonization of the Philippines. This is now, this is how there's a half speak, a generational gap for Tagalog Spanish and Tagalog English. Again, I apologize for any pronunciation issues. I again, I apologize. The annexation of Hawaii, which was Hawaii was stolen from the kingdom in Hawaii by a strategic overthrow of their power over the islands. So, yay! Good. Thank you, Janine. Okay. So then in 1942 to 46, Japanese internment camps during World War II. So this is something that we have talked about possibly in schooling. Despite being American citizens for generations, distrust of Japanese Americans resulted in internment for fear that they supported the enemy based on their heritage. So the internment camps, everyone, people had to leave their homes, physically move out into designated areas of California where they lived for 4 years during World War II. People still, to this day, because remember, this was 80 years ago. People are still alive from then. There is anti-sentiment against, there is sentiment against Japanese people because of that, despite being American citizens. One of the first governors of Asian descent was I want to say that he fought in World War II and he was a veteran and he was a very pivotal person and yet was denied service at multiple different places just because it was assumed that he supported the enemy despite fighting for where he was from, which was the United States. Yes, Hawaii was stolen. It was not politely given to the United States. There was a coup. They overthrew the queen. It was very detrimental. It was a strategic move based on the United States' part. And I want to say I could have gotten this wrong, but it's very interesting. Please look it up. About how I think it was the diplomat from the US went against, I think, other, yeah, exactly. Killigan's got it. But yes, please look it up. I'm butchering it. I did not do enough research on it last night. But it's in the back of my mind, a certain TikTok on it. I'm really establishing a trust here. Anyway, but yeah, so Japanese internment. 1947 to 89, U.S. imperialism in Asia, Korea and Vietnam, which resulted in genocide, chemical warfare. I'm sure we've all seen that famous picture of the girl running after being burned by napalm. And we established dictators. This era of wars between the U.S. Getting involved in conflict, starting conflict in Asia, was very detrimental, and especially to the depiction of Asian women. This time period, was not long ago. I mean, 89, like what? That's 40 years ago. I cannot tell you how much this will come into play. We'll get into it. And then 1982, the murder of Vincent Chin. Mistaken for Japanese, he was murdered by auto workers in Detroit. His murderers were not given jail time. This is something that we are all too accustomed to. And this is, Asian Americans are no exception. So, Vincent Chin, if you're into true crime or you want to learn more about this atrocious hate crime, I will have a link later on videos that you can watch, and in particular one, the proceeds from the video will be donated as well. So again, very interesting. You can find a new true crime creator, and you can learn about Asian American issues. But Vincent Chin, so very important. He very much spurred a a moment in history where Asian Americans really stood up for themselves, and it was amazing and it was very important. So, important moment. Okay, the model minority myth and how it hurts everyone. So, the model minority myth was created to divide Asian and Black communities after years of solidarity. Again, very interesting topic. Asian Americans and the Black community worked together for years. Malcolm X, his best friend, was a Japanese American man who fought against the internment. He was at the I can't remember his name. I feel so bad about this, but Malcolm X, when he was shot, famously his Japanese American friend was the one that cradled his head when he was dying. There's a Asian woman that was married to a civil rights activist, and she was pivotal, amazing lady, and she's still alive, I want to say, or she just died. But Grace, I think her name was Grace. She was very important in the civil rights movement, and people forget about this. Both our communities forget about our solidarity, unfortunately, because of the model minority myth, which was created by capitalizing on our proximity to whiteness. The white majority used the success, quote, of Asian Americans to say that racial policies and inequalities didn't exist and was therefore the fault of the Black community for not working hard enough. What this did was put our communities at odds and hurt us both. Asians were seen as doing fine despite vast earning disparities and Black communities being systemically oppressed. So here, this image that I have here is the triangulation of racial positions. So up in the top right, superior and the insider. So seen as a U.S. citizen, seen as what a American looks like, right? And superior, they are superior to other groups. Asians are seen as more superior than Black Americans, but are seen as foreigners, right? Black Americans are seen as Americans, but they are seen as more inferior than, say, us, say Asian Americans. So what this does is it creates this dissonant, right? Now we're fighting each other over different issues instead of working together to overcome a similar goal, right? So that's why the model minority myth is dangerous. We don't benefit from it. It's not good to be seen as the good minority. What it does is it creates this A, animosity, and then B, we ignore these issues, right? We are not a monolith. There are, like Kiligan said, 40, how many did you say? 48 countries in Asia that have their own unique issues. Many Asian Americans, Southeast Asian Americans, come as refugees. And it's important to see that these groups are affected by different issues, right? Intersectionality, remember? So, the national average of poverty rate is 11.3, yet Hmong are 27.4%, Cambodian 18.2, Vietnamese 13%, Laotian, someone let me know, 12.2. We are not all doing fine. We're not all doing fine. And it's important to notate this because what it does is that if we're doing fine, nobody pays attention when we say that we're struggling, right? We're complaining. What are we complaining about, right? And if people think that we're doing fine and we're trying to ask for more of the pot, people that are disenfranchised are like, hey, wait your turn, you know? So it's important to know that the model minority myth, Asian Americans need to stop leaning into this. It hurts us. We don't want to be this. And to understand that we need to uplift our Black community as well. Important, okay? Imperialism and the origins of fetishization. So this is something that really is important to Asian women. This is where the Atlanta shootings come in. This is where it stems from. This is why Asian people are saying this is a hate crime. This is where these stereotypes originate. The Page Act, right? We talked about this. It creates the assumption that Asian women are prostitutes, that we have loose morals, that we are not educated, that we're loose, right? Throughout the Vietnam, US, Philippine, World War II, and Korean Wars, American GIs took part in the sex industry that was supplied with enslaved women from Korea known as comfort women. Please read up on comfort women. It's very important to know about. The women are still seeking, some of them are still alive, and they're seeking restitution. It's important. Some are just asking for it to be acknowledged and for an apology. So let's support that as well. In the Philippines, they offered a girl for the quote price of a burger. Vietnam had R&R facilities in Thailand. Over 70,000 men visited between 66 and 69. Quote, the military accepts access to indigenous women's bodies as a quote necessity for overseas GIs. With this came Asian-themed porn and sex tourism culture that were brought back to the US. For example, Full Metal Jacket and its infamous line, "Me love you long time." Okay? Where a prostitute, a caricature of Asian women, solicits an American soldier. As a result, to this day, several million tourists from the EU and the US travel to Thailand annually. For what? The sex tourism that is there. So everybody, keep this in mind. This will come back later. It's pertinent to what I'll be talking about. And it comes into play into an experience that I'll be sharing later. That if you meet a middle-aged man, particularly if they're a veteran, and they say, "Oh, me and my guy friends, we traveled to Thailand all the time." No, they are not there eating really great mangoes. Okay, they are not there to pet elephants. All right, cool. Glad we established that. Um, the the rest and relaxation facilities in Thailand, again, it wasn't something that Thailand set up. Okay, it was something a little more insidious. And I'm not quite comfortable necessarily telling that out loud. So we're not going to do that. But again, for example, I mentioned this on a story that I had posted on online. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the Night Stalker series on Netflix, but he was a serial killer who was active, I want to say, in the 80s. And this is also an example of erasure, that people don't acknowledge that this is pertinent to an experience. He was heavily influenced by his Green Beret Vietnam veteran cousin, who participated in said R&R facilities and war crimes, truly, where he showed pictures he took of women that he had assaulted and one that he had decapitated. As a result, in the documentary, um, the detectives said that they did not see a link between the victims. But if you look at it, 40% of the people that were killed, maybe it was a little bit more than that, almost half were Asian. His first two victims, the first one was a little girl, a little Asian girl, and the next was a mid-20s Asian woman. And looking at these, it's like the violence against Asian women, you cannot separate the two, especially with his upbringing, which they neglected to mention in the documentary. And I was like, what kind of detective? Anyway, I digress. But again, imperialism and the origins of fetishization heavily are influenced by what happened, or even I could say this, a result of what happened in these wars that were perpetrated by the US. As a result, the Asian woman was turned into a sexual object, described in literature. Book Orientalism by Professor Edwards said, the local women are usually the creatures of male power fantasy. They express unlimited sensuality, they are more or less stupid, and above all, they are willing. This was a professor that spoke about this. He wrote a book that people read about this. While Asian men, according to President Theodore Roosevelt, in response to the campaign to colonize the Philippines, he, quote, took this message to heart, claiming civilized men, white Western men, had a, quote, manly duty to destroy and uplift lesser primitive men, namely Asian, for their own good and the good of civilization. Not only did this bring an era of imperialism and war to Asia, but it brought about the assault on Asian men and the push to emasculate them and conquer the women. This is the president. Seems a little not quite, definitely more eloquently put than something we may or may not have heard a year ago, but yeah. There are feminist theories that theorize Asian women fetishes lie in feminist pushback to traditional gender roles. Thus, there creates a demand for Asian women through this stereotype, is just that, a stereotype, by men with damaging views on women, many with violent and controlling tendencies. When Asian women are associated with violent sexual tendencies and submissive demeanor, it attracts violent men who are under the impression that their advances are wanted and accepted by society. Okay? So how does this affect us today? These Asian spas, right, in the Atlanta shooting have yet to be confirmed by authorities, media, or law enforcement to be places for sex work. So where did this assumption come from, right? With the knowledge that we know now, Asian spas are seen as places for a happy ending, or ending a massage with a Thai goodbye, or in blatant terms, a sexual favor. As the comment section of so many articles has told me. This is reminiscent of the sex tourism in Southeast Asia, taken advantage of by Western men reliving wartime days. While decriminalizing sex work is another issue and important, it is hurtful to AAPI women when the historical context is interwoven. The assumption that somebody is a sex worker is A, incorrect, and B, rooted in historical racism, as the facts state. But this was a long time ago, you may say, Haley. Like, yeah, I know 40 years isn't too long, but that was a long time ago. Was it? Pekin, Illinois. Pekin, Illinois is a town outside of Peoria, Illinois. It used to be, I don't know if it still is, the KKK headquarters for Illinois, and named after Peking, as in China, because they said that they were on the opposite side of the world, same as Canton, Illinois. Yes, these towns do exist, and their high school mascot was the Chinks up until the 1980s, when newspapers refused to report on their sports teams because they did not agree with this being their name. So the town had a vote, and they voted on whether or not to keep the name or change it to Dragons. They voted, and everybody voted to keep the name. The town was like, okay, I guess we'll vote again. So they voted again, and they voted to keep the name. So the town was like, bro, we gotta change the name. You understand? We gave you 2 chances to stop being racist. So they changed the name anyways to the Dragons, thank goodness. But in recent days, there have been letters written to newspapers. There's a pushback in the town to bring the name back. And a man by, his last name's Brown. I don't know. I have a link to the article that you guys can access. But he said that he was very proud to be the mascot when he went to school there. And he was very upset when they changed the name because he was the Chink, and he dressed up in, quote, traditional Chinese clothing, walked out onto the football field to greet the other team with the female version, the girl version of Chink, the Chinklet. Their skating rink in the town is called the Chink Rink. You understand that this was not a long time ago. It's right now, and it's still happening, and people still feel this way. And that is why it's important that when you guys are watching this and you're learning this, you have these facts and these figures and these historical events in your back pocket to say, hey, this is where it comes from, and this is why it's upsetting and needs to stop, right? Okay. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for. So these are my stories. I think it's important that people know somebody that things have happened to make it real. And I hope that the people that are watching today are watching with, a genuine interest and a genuine, with genuine empathy, um, to want to prevent these things from happening. And I have family, I have friends that, they never really thought about this in this way. They didn't know that this was happening. Um, and, I think I owe it to A, the community, and B, them to know what it's like and what it's going on with. And I think that what is going on with me and how the world works. Okay, so in light of the movement as of a couple of weeks ago, catcalling, there is women are calling out about the 97% of women who experience street harassment and violence. Um, this is something Asian women deal with, but with the added layer of fetishization, right? So predators make assumptions and preying on women overseas. Okay, so this link that I'm about to show you is a TikTok that went viral for a very unfortunate reason. And it kind of depicts the the inner thinking of the type of people that tend to prey on people like me. Okay? So let's see how this goes. Oop. Okay, here we are. Okay, here we go. Oh, God. I literally his face. Hold on. Okay. Y'all need to hear it. Trigger warning for my fellow people. You might want to mute the sound until this video is over.
Beautiful Asian girl, and I mean like a girl out of your league.
Hold on. Let me just refresh this because
Asian girl, and I mean like a girl out of your league.
Hold on. All right, ready?
So, any of you guys interested in dating or knowing or marrying a beautiful Asian girl, and I mean like a girl out of your league? Let's talk about that kind of girl, okay? The first thing I can tell you is they're in Asia. They're not here, okay? The ones that are here are like not cool, not nice. I rarely meet a sweet one. It's kind of like they want to get here. So if you're going to be the guy to help them get here, they'll be a king to you. And you can have them, gosh, I mean, probably 5 years or so, maybe 7. And don't worry if they dump you. The guys get so worried, oh my God, she's going to dump you. Well, duh, of course she is. But that's like 5, 7 years down the line. And when that occurs, just go get another one. Don't worry. There are lots. I mean, like many, many, many.
Thank you. Okay. Um. Okay, that was a PG version. That is the thinking that we Asian women know exist out there. I didn't think he'd be dumb enough to say it in public, but he did. That is what people that look like me are up against. So comparing the numbers, right? Asian women, API women, are the most trafficked group worldwide. And while nationally 21% of women experience rape or attempted rape in their lifetime, up to 61% of Asian women face physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner. So you are 3 times likely. And that is a reality that we live. And again, with the 97%, women talk about this. It's like if one M&M is poisoned and you'll die in a bowl of M&Ms, are you going to eat a handful of M&Ms? No, you're going to be very cautious. You're going to look at the M&Ms. You're going to examine them, see if they look different, smell different, any sort of thing about it to avoid any sort of interaction or potential run-in. Correct? Yeah. So, oh, can you guys hear me? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Okay. So, for me, um, in connection to the Vietnam War and Thailand sex industry, I had probably the most disturbing Uber ride of my entire life. Back to back, two terrible Uber rides back to back. And I will never take a ride share by myself anymore. I actively avoid it. People that know me, I walk everywhere. Um, it's either completely public transportation with tons of people around, or if I have to take a ride share, it's those group ride shares. What happened was I had an internship that required me to go to Vegas for an event that we had set up. It was a conference, and so very professional. I was like, but I was underage, so I couldn't do anything fun. But it was fun to be able to travel for work and say that you travel for work. And um, I was on my way back to the airport. I was at the Hard Rock Hotel, and the airport is literally a straight line to Hard Rock. Hard Rock is down the street, along down the street, but a mile away. And I get in this car, and the guy does not speak English, and that's not a problem. I was like, okay, but he turned off his phone, and then we started driving down side streets, and already, I had been hit on by older men at the conference. I was probably one of the only Asian people there. It's you're very aware of this history in the back of your mind, and you're very aware of people like that we saw. And so I'm a little raw, right? Everybody worries about me. People are like, hey, make sure you are on the elevator alone when you go back to your hotel room, so that nobody goes into your hotel room door behind you or forces you in there. It's very scary, to be a woman, but add on top of that you're three times more likely for this to happen to you. It's terrifying, right? So I am in the Uber. He's taking side streets. I don't know Vegas, and I'm trying to speak with him. And he's like kind of like waving me off, and then he pulls into the basement of the airport. Right? He turns off the car, and I'm about to just ditch their luggage and jump out, but then he turns on the navigation again. I was like, thank God. And he finally pulls back out. Honestly, I probably should have just jumped out. I probably should have just jumped out. Um, but it ended up being okay. He pulls into the correct terminal, and I get out. I'm like, oh God. And he says, sorry. I'm like, that's, I was like, oh, okay. So I get my luggage and I leave. And I meet back up with my manager. And she's like, oh, how was it? I was like, I'm not okay. I'm like, not okay. I thought I was gonna get trafficked. It's fine. Um, so I get home. I'm off the airport. I'm out of the airport, and I have my picture on my Uber app, right? So that they know they're picking up me, um, identify me, right? The Uber driver calls me 3 times. Um, Between the time I get out of the airport and I called the Uber to the time that I was right there. That's fine, but 3 times is a lot. And it was like are you, do you know where you're going? It was like, are you good? How are you? It was like, I'll see you there, dude. And I get into the car and it's this middle-aged white man. Um, and that's fine, like I've half my family's white. I am normally comfortable. Um, but I'm sitting in the back of the car. I normally talk to the Uber driver and he starts asking me questions. And he's like, "Hey, so where are you from?" Microaggression right there. And I'm like, "I know what you're doing. It's also because I'm mixed. People want to know where I'm from." Um, for those that are asking, or maybe this is something you want to ask, the correct way is like, if you don't mind me asking, what is your ethnicity? What is your background? That is more respectful. That is the respectful way to do it. Um, and then have like a polite conversation about it. But where are you from implies that you are not American. It implies that you came here. It implies that you don't belong here. So let's not do that. But he asked me, where are you from? And so I'm cheeky, right? And I say, I'm from here. I'm from here. And he goes, oh, okay, where are your parents from? And I say, oh, my dad's from Western Springs and my mom grew up in the city. Because I know that wasn't the answer he was looking for. I need him to get there on his own. And then he said, have you been to China? And I said, okay, yeah. Like, I was like, yes, fam. Okay, fine. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I've been. My mom's Chinese, my dad's white. And he says, oh my goodness. Yeah, I love Asia. I have so much fun there. And I was like, oh, you've been. He said, yes. I go all the time with my buddies. We go to Thailand all the time. Big red flag. Big red flag. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, this man goes to Thailand with his buddies. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's like that. I was like, oh, like, do you guys take your families? Like, hopefully, maybe, like, families. And he's like, no, 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 it's me and my old, I'm a veteran. I was like, okay, okay, cool, 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 cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ah, God. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. I was like, oh, nice. Inside, freaking out because I have a 40-minute drive with this man. I'm stuck in the car alone with this man who just admitted to me that he goes to Thailand with his old buddies from the war to an area known for sexual tourism that may or may not involve underage people. I also look young for my age. Terrifying. Additionally, he. So we get to my house. This is my home, right? He now knows where I live. And I get out. I say, haha, thank you. And I grab my own stuff. Like, I'm like, don't touch me. Don't come near me. And I go to my door and I knock, and all the lights are out. It's slightly dark. All the lights are out in the house. I'm terrified that nobody's home. I'm knocking. Nobody is answering. I finally try the door. It's open. I go inside and I yell for my dad. So my dad, pops his head out, and he's like, "Oh, you're home." And I'm like, "Yeah, can you?" So I'm like kind of standing there and I'm looking and the guy's not leaving. He's not leaving. And I I remember telling my dad, I'm like, "Can you stick your head out the door? Can you just look, And so my dad opens the door and the guy immediately backs out. Now, that maybe or may not be a coincidence. Maybe he had other things, I don't know, but probably one of the scariest moments. What at that point in my life, that was probably one of the moments where I thought something bad was going to happen. So that is why it's important to understand that these wars and these industries and these stereotypes that come from these events are very important um, to know about, right? Because it adds another element, right? Like women, of course, probably don't feel comfortable being alone and getting hit on, right? Getting catcalled, things like that. But add in this element that you know this about this person, you know what they know about you, or at least what they think about you, and that it is terrifying what he is thinking about you on top of what they are saying. Additionally, they think that you're submissive, that you're quiet, that you're docile, and that you will take it, right? It emboldens these people that already think it's okay to catcall, and they get bolder. And so, for example, it was terrifying going to school. I went to school in Iowa because there were moments where I was in a crowd of people and was physically touched or assaulted in broad daylight in front of other people. Touched without my consent, touched grossly, if that makes sense. Like just it was slimy. And it's very different for women of color. I'm not saying that getting catcalled and that violence against women in general, but I will say that the intersectionality of um, women of color adds an element of imperialism, of dominance, of historically being um, harassed and tortured by people of power. And that is why it is scary. So, here is an example of what of what dating as an Asian woman looks like. So, dating and distrust, violent and explicit messaging, microaggression on dates, and objectification. This is an actual screenshot I have of a guy that I talked to on Tinder. When I did it the one freaking time, never again. Anyway, it's fine. It's not fine. It's fine. So, this guy, his opening line, "We love Asian girls." Me, what the fuck? That's the gif I get. What the fuck? Who's we? He says, "Me and my boys." Oh god, no. Block. Goodbye. Let's unpack this, okay? I deleted the app soon after this. This was probably, one of my first interactions, and that was it. Um, we. I'm sorry, I did not realize that I came onto this app to meet multiple people all at once, right? We know what this means. Me and my boys. Why? This all exemplifies that Asian women are seen as objects, are seen as one and the same, interchangeable, no identity, right? This is an example, right, that outwardly they admit that they have these ideas, or they just want to make me uncomfortable, or they think it's funny, right? Again, not fun. It's not fun. But that's the reality. This is what happens. This is something that I personally have experienced. This is something you see. Microaggressions on dates. Like we talked about before, things that people have said and done, and do and think, that are veiled prejudice, right? Veiled racist remarks. And um so I've been on, I went on a couple dates my freshman year with guys of different backgrounds. And one in particular, I cut him some slack because he came from a town that was not diverse at all. And it was a town of like 60. It was very small. But at the same time, it's like I don't really want to go through constantly saying like, "Hey, what you said hurt me." Right? Like it's not it's not fun, right? It's hard to enjoy yourself when that's happening. So he asked things like, "Oh, he asked what your background is," and I was like, "Oh, I'm that." He was respectful about that. I was like, "Good. This is a good sign." Um, I said, I gave him what I was. I was I'm Chinese and Danish. He's like, "Oh, we connected over our white side, so that's cool." But then he was like, "Oh, my freshman year roommate was a Chinese exchange student." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." I was like, "Huh, where's this going?" Yeah. And he said, "Yeah. Do you know him?" So that was kind of my exact reaction. I was just like kind of sitting there like, "Are you going to give me a name?" Yeah. Like I'm a talkative person, fine. Like maybe I know you, but this school's 32,000 people, right? And you're a year older than me. I'm not going to know your freshman year roommate, especially just the beginning of second semester. Um so then I didn't say anything. I was kind of staring at him and he said, "Oh no, no, it's not because of that." "Because of what?" I was like, "Oh." He said, "It's because he's really outgoing." I don't really know what to make of that whole thing. But I was like, oh, okay. No, I don't think I know him. So I tried to turn it into something, I tried to turn it around because I was like, I'll talk to someone. I don't care. And I was like, well, I guess you must have had like some really good food, like, yeah, lucky you. And he goes, oh, yeah, he once brought dumplings his mom made. And I was like, oh my God, like, wow. At this point, I really miss good Chinese food. And he's like, yeah, to be honest, it kind of smelled. Ladies and gentlemen, if you take one thing away from being here, it's to never say that. Like, never. Okay? Don't do it. But that that happened, right? And I was just kind of like, I don't want to be here anymore. It's one thing after another, and it's like, okay, fine, good intentions, I guess, but like, is it? Like, it's a lot of things that you have to think about constantly. It's like another level of analysis that you have to add on top of getting to know a person, know if they're a serial killer or not. Like, it's on top of that, is he objectifying me? Does he only see me as a sexual object? And does he say microaggressions against Asians? Does he have these ideas about Asian people, which is my family, right? Nobody wants to be around somebody that could potentially insult their family or insult the people that they're from, right? Like nobody likes that. Everybody can empathize with that. And then there was, of course, the date where the guy asked me, is it true that if you are a white guy and you go to China, all of the women love you? And I said, no. What? Like, they'll probably think you look interesting, but I don't think they're gonna. What? So I was like, I don't know. What? And I tried to make it funny. I was like, oh, people wanted to take pictures with my dad because he had blonde hair. They're like, look at that. Like, that's weird. But then he mentions that his stepmom is Filipino. I was like, okay, not only is it weird that you thought that I was Filipino and now you're talking about how your stepmom's Filipino, it's like, why did you bring that up? Why did you think this was the time? Why did you think it was okay to do that? Right? But on top of that, it's it's reminiscent of that TikTok that we saw, right? His dad was also a military guy. Nothing against military people, but I will say that there is a trend. And it's uncomfy if someone says, "Oh, you look like my stepmom," right? Like you're on a date and the guy goes, "Hey, you look like my stepmom." It's like, okay, this is weird. What's the vibe we're going for here, right? But add in imperialism, add in another layer of that, the intersectionality, right? Yeah. So it's a lot of fun to go on dates. That's why I don't do it. Ha. But that's that is what dating as an Asian woman feels like. So it's important to understand that these types of men exist. And I've avoided instances, I've avoided being in scary situations if these people turn out to have these ideas about me, right? Um, I think probably the scariest one, this is the last story, was when I was, I was out at some bars at school and we were trying to find my friend's phone. She had lost it and she has a GPS tracker in it. So we saw it move around. And so we were like, somebody stole it. Like, let's go get it, right? And we're standing outside the bars trying to figure out where it is. We're looking at the tracker. And there are these two guys standing. And there's this look that all Asian women know. Women know it, but Asian women know this particular version of the look. And it's when you know somebody is they're about to say something. They're about to say something to you and they have that look in their eye. And you know it's going to be problematic and you're just like I'm a steal myself. It's like it's coming. But um they came up to us and they said, what are you guys doing?" And I was like, we're looking for her phone. Like, what do you need? And he goes, "Oh, maybe I could help you out. Maybe I could help you out." And I was like, if you don't have her phone, I don't want to, like, I don't, what, dude? And he said, "Oh, well, I love your skin." Your type has the most beautiful skin. And he got in detailed. He was like, he said some things about things being slanted. He was talking about explicit stuff. And you're standing there and you're alone. You're with your friends, but you're a group of girls. And yeah, I hate men. it's it's hard to empathize and be open-minded when this is things that happen. And it gets worse. These boys continue to talk about me, ask me if me and my friend were twins. She's Italian. I don't understand, but yeah. they continued to talk to me about my skin, about that I'm their favorite type of skin. And it makes you feel gross. And this bystander, a guy was filming for a documentary for a film project, right? And he turns and he's like, "Hey, leave those girls alone," right? He was black, and these two white boys turned on him and immediately just started yelling these things at this guy, like it was getting heated. They were coming closer to him, and the bouncers came out. This was after bar closed. The bouncers came out. They're like, "What's going on?" They got in between the guys. The two guys started yelling the N word at this guy that had tried to help me. They got closer. The bouncers were pushing them back, and the guy went to punch the bystander that helped me. Ended up hitting the bouncer. The bouncers like pushing them back, things like that, and then offered to walk the bystander home. And so of course us girls were terrified. We're standing there. I grossed out, terrified, and this is late at night. I don't want to call law enforcement because A, there was none around, B, they're standing right there. And so the guys continued to circle the block, and we didn't want to go home right away because we lived right next door, and we did not want them to know that that was where we lived. And this is a situation that is similar to what a lot of women experience, but with an added level of knowing that that is how they think, right? And they felt that it was okay to say that to me, to my face, right? A typical catcall is, "Hey, smile." I don't get smile. I get explicit detail. And that is something that happens way too often for someone, for Asian women to be naive, right? And so when we see things like Atlanta happen, and the guy says that he was going to eliminate his sexual temptations, we know what that means. And he's banking on everybody thinking, and he's probably naive and thinks that everybody thinks this way, that Asian women are not individuals, they are sexual objects. And that is why it's a hate crime. Okay, so who needs to speak up and who doesn't owe us anything, okay? AAPI, my fellow people. Some of us really leaned into that model minority myth. We really leaned into it. Some of us even perpetuated anti-blackness within our communities. And that is something that, thankfully was brought up and really addressed during the Black Lives Matter movement this past summer. But we got to keep going. We got to keep talking about these tough things in our families, because we do perpetuate this prejudice and perpetuate these racist systems towards Black people. So personally, I understand if other people of color do not have the bandwidth or the emotional currency left to give at this moment, right? That's different than them perpetuating stereotypes. That's different. What I'm saying is discussing, actively posting, arguing, having those, heated debates in comment sections. I am more understanding if I don't see them saying anything. I get that. Because, the model minority myth did a lot of damage, and there's a lot that needs to be repaired there before we can expect solidarity. Not that it's transactional, but things like that. But yeah, so I think that ultimately those who have the power in situations are responsible for dispelling beliefs and stereotypes. Everybody if you are in the presence of injustice, like the quote says, evil only wins if good people do nothing, right? What really hurt me during Atlanta during this past week was that people were a more concerned about arguing whether or not it was a hate crime than being upset over what had happened. Or people were completely silent and didn't want to speak on these issues despite knowing, having friends that are Asian. And I think also we know, especially based off of how other shootings have been reported, um, that many people did not hear about the shooting, which is most terrifying, um, that they did not deem it newsworthy enough to draw attention to it, to be exasperated, to be upset. And because of that, it's a perfect example of erasure that, you know, people are not talking about it. People don't think that this is newsworthy or worthy of recording or talking about. Um, and that is why the way that we are going to combat this is by making it be seen. Because our issues stem from erasure and lack of, understanding, and more so aligned with fighting sexism, it's going to look different than how we fight other issues. So that's something to keep in mind of people. We really need to just be educating ourselves different on these different issues in order to not perpetuate them further, but also um, so that we can recognize when something means something deeper, right? Okay. So in your activism, right, I'm sending you off into the world now. Um, use the appropriate hashtags. Do not detract from Black Lives Matter. That is number one, okay? The appropriate hashtag to use is Stop Asian Hate. So do not detract from Black Lives Matter. We must not cannibalize or appropriate when we are both fighting for the same cause. Therefore, include hashtag BLM or Black Lives Matter. Do not appropriate these in using hashtag Asian Lives Matter or Protect Asian Women, because these are hashtags that are versions of the Black Lives Matter movement and Protect Black Women. Because ultimately, protecting Black women results in protection of our own, in fighting white supremacy. And we have to put, some respect into that. Okay? We are not going to detract. We can all take up the same amount of space that we need. Okay? Thank you. All right, fact checks. Something I also have been seeing is people saying Black people commit the most crimes against Asians. Incorrect. Incorrect. That is false. Okay? Crimes perpetrated by Black individuals tend to be reported more. According to this crime justice statistics from the Federal Bureau of Investigation on hate crimes, white people made up 51% of hate crimes against AAPI, followed by Black individuals, and it more aligned with the populations of people. Okay? So that is an incorrect statistic. We are not going to perpetuate that. We are not going to further be divisive. Okay? No. We need to come together. Step it. All right. And this was a hate crime, okay? The Atlanta shootings were a hate crime. A hate crime, also known as bias motivated crime or bias crime, is a prejudice motivated crime which occurs when a perpetrator targets a victim of because of their membership of a certain social group or race. He himself said that he targeted the objects of his sexual fantasies, which are Asian women. And from the history that we have examined, we know where that comes from and why it is particularly targeting Asian women. Let's establish that the shooter has a reason to lie. Hate crimes carry more aggressive charges and harsher sentences. Let's, yeah, okay. Why would he be truthful here? Why would he be truthful? He's a criminal. He killed people. He has every interest to not tell the truth. Okay? He's not a reliable source. With the information we have established today, we know that Asian women are seen as sexual objects. Even if he claims that this is sexually motivated, then the fetishization of Asian women connects these issues, not including the math, okay? 4% of Georgia is Asian. 6 out of 8 people were Asian. He went to 100% Asian owned and known businesses, one of which, look at this map, look at the map, was 27 miles away. He consciously drove from the two spas across from each other to Woodstock to the third place because he knew about it. Okay? Speaks for itself. And they also spoke way too soon in talking about whether or not it was a hate crime without observing all of his different affiliations. Okay? Take a minute. Okay, everyone, how to help and where to learn. Combat AAPI stereotypes and microaggressions. Say something when we are, I did not finish that sentence, when we are not around, okay? The stereotype that Asian women are quiet and docile, for those of y'all that know me, I'm freaking loud. I think that if someone were to be like, oh my God, beautiful Asian girl, I love you because you are quiet and docile and submissive, I'd be like, bitch, I think you'll actually be like really disappointed. So, sorry. Sorry, not sorry. God. So yeah, say something. Someone pulls the eyes, cut it out. Somebody makes fun of someone's accent or lack thereof, or says something that's like, bro, what? I believe in you all, and honestly, it goes a long way. Okay, it helps people self-examine. You got to check your friends. Check your friends. Learn about AAPI issues, which you're doing now. So thank you. But read more. Research the anti-Asian riots that happened in the 1800s. I did not get into that. Look into Asian and Black community solidarity and alliance. It existed. It was extremely important. There was I feel like his last name was Wallace. He he was very vocal about being against the Anti-Chinese Exclusion Act. Our solidarity goes back hundreds of years. Alrighty, post about what is happening. Help victims be seen. People very close to me have yet to speak out, and it is disheartening to see the small support dwindle. This was a mass shooting. Treat it like all other mass shootings have been reported. Okay? Erasure is when history is not reported. This is the moment. Okay? This is the turning point. We need to talk about these things. So in your post, you can talk about this is what fetishization means. This is why it's not a compliment. This is my story if you feel comfortable telling people in your life about what's happened to you. Um, I'm not asking for my fellow AAPI people to do anything. I know that we're all hurting, and I while this is hard, I do think that me doing this will do some good. Some people will hear about something, they'll understand like what's going on, right? But people that are silent on this issue, it's hurtful. It's very hurtful. So, and check in on your AAPI friends. That goes such a long way. I felt 10 times better. Not great, I was still upset, but like it it reassured me that my friends knew that I would be upset about this. It reassured me that my friends were listening, knew about the issues that I faced, um, and that they cared. Okay? And I know we all care for our friends. So let's at least do that, okay? How to help and where to learn. Call your local and state representatives to push protective and preventative policy to help people of color. Now you got to report instances of AAPI hate and violence. You see something, you say something. And advocate for Black and Asian solidarity. Now is not the time to become pro police. No. It was not a month ago that a boy named Christian who was Asian, adopted, was shot with his hands in the air during a mental health crisis. He was 19. Okay, the, more policing does not help us. It does not help us, and it further divides our communities. We're not going to do that. We are trying to educate people to prevent this. All right, learn about the murder of Vincent Chin at this video link. Okay, I will create a document that will be available for people to, you can share the link. It'll be, you can put in your bio. I don't know, things like that. By Stephanie Sue, who is a Korean American from Atlanta. She's from Atlanta and she's very affected by this. And she is donating all the money that she generates from this video. She's a great true crime. She does mukbangs, but she also has podcasts, and she's very entertaining. And you'll understand why I like her because she acts a lot like me. So, watch AAPI documentaries. I really encourage you guys to watch this series. There's 5 parts. It takes you through the history. It's very interesting about Asian Americans on PBS, and it's free. They're each an hour long. About like 50 something minutes. Um, so lots of good resources. I am biased, but one of my favorite shows, which is written by Bruce Lee, he wrote it back in the 70s, and it finally got produced in 2019. Um, thank you. And is called Warrior on HBO Max. It depicts Chinese immigrants to San Francisco before the Exclusion Act and after the Civil War, and it's very empowering to see. It you know you see yourself and you see some of the microaggressions and the just blatant racism, and it's a kung fu shit, you know what I mean? So I mean Bruce Lee, and they pretty cute too, so you get it. And on a Bruce Lee kick, for my sports fans, there is a Bruce Lee documentary by 30 for 30. Very fun, very interesting. It shows how Bruce Lee was, loved by everybody. He brought together so many different groups of people, and really helped Asian Americans and Asian men in particular feel masculine, feel good about themselves, and proud of who they were. And yeah, he was great. Anyway, R.I.P. God. And then here is where to donate. Here are the victims' funerals and support to support their families. You can click on these. These are their GoFundmes, and there's it's not just people that died. It's also people that were injured, people that their families are devastated. Like one, the two sons, their mom died, and she was a single mom. It's it's important, very important. And the other places to donate, if if you have the money to do so. Red Canary Song is a group that works to fight for human and labor rights for Asian and migrant workers, specifically sex workers, because they do exist and we should be fighting for sex workers' rights. But we are not going to link Asian race with sex work. Okay, that is not what we're gonna do. All right, that's very problematic. Stop AAPI Hate, which is what we are donating to tonight. I'm not sure if this thing's updating. I will check. If you look in my about section of my stream, you'll see. Um, and then there's NAPAWF. This group is primarily addresses the needs of AAPI women in the US through policy change and driving systemic change in the United States. And there are different chapters around the country, so you can join to help work. And they do some amazing things. So there are my citations. Okay, so I'm gonna back this up so that we'll flip through these, but um, we're gonna keep that there, and I will look at questions now. So let's see what is up. Um, Alrighty. Hold the phone, everybody. I'm here. Ba 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 na 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 na. Okay. All right. Microaggressions in high school. Haha. Yeah. Something that was interesting about DGS, I think, was that um our Asian population was a lot smaller than the other high school. And I think what was really sad to see was how much the guys wanted to distance themselves from their Asian identity. I think that was what I found really. I think that in high school I didn't have the words to describe what it was, like the feeling I had when I thought about them. I mean, there are ones that I didn't know were half until, uh, recently, or outside of school, like in a Chinese class. Like one of the guys from our high school was in it with me, and I was like, oh my God, like, wait, your mom's Chinese? Oh, okay. And, I think that I was pretty vocal about being proud to be half Asian. But I also think that our school was a pretty diverse for what people call diverse. But I mean, whatever. Take that with a grain of salt. Um, I think what was the most upsetting moment, I was very vocal and argumentative in kind of gangbusters when I was in a senior in high school. And I'm glad you learned something. Thank you so much. Thanks. um, I think what was probably the worst was when I was in a girl was arguing. What? No, me? No. What? Was when a gym teacher showed a very old Key and Peele sketch that depicted a um, caricaturized Asian boy, and they made jokes about his penis size and how he was weak and small and ugly. And he it was a teacher that was he was like, "Oh, we'll show something funny." And there were other kids in that class that were Asian with me. And I was very uncomfortable, and also I was really upset that he thought that that was appropriate. So I told him, I was like, what makes you think that that was okay? And he was like, "Oh, I thought it was because he wasn't athletic in the skit." And I was like, "No, why did they mention his penis size? You know that that's a problem and that's a stereotype. And you alienated yourself from a lot of the Asian kids in your class just now. I don't think you should ever show that again. And that's very detrimental, especially to hear your classmates laugh about that. It's humiliating." And he paused and he took a second to think about it. And he's like, "Thank you so much for telling me." And he said, "Okay, I'll take that into consideration." I was like, "Okay, you do that." And I left. And the next day he pulled me aside and he was like, "Thank you so much for telling me that. Um, I'm never gonna show that again. I really didn't think about it when I showed it. And thank you." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And I was his favorite student from like the rest of the year until I graduated. So that's what I'm saying. But you know, it's honest conversations like that that make a big difference. But microaggressions, I think that people knew not to fuck with me, but also like I think I just very much was vocal about being mixed. But additionally, um I don't think I necessarily hung out with people that said things like that to me. I really can't determine too many, which is a good thing, but I experienced more of it when I went to college for sure. Um and I was in a lot of different groups in high school. I would also say I'm very different from I was in high school. So I could be wrong. Y'all might remember things about me in high school that maybe aren't um I'm not remembering right. But um I also, I did take the sociology of race class, which was super interesting. It was very cool. And a lot of what I talked about today comes from that as well. Yeah, thank you. Um, and we got to the subject on Asian Americans, and there were only three white kids in that class. The rest were people of color that were interested. And they genuinely spoke up and asked, "Why are we learning about this? Like, why are we learning about Asian Americans? They're doing just fine." And my teacher, he was like, no, we're going to talk about that and what the minority myth is and things like that. And it was very important for me to hear, especially, it was my senior year as well. And it, it was important to hear them say that and explain why there should be more solidarity. So yeah, that was kind of my experience in high school. College was definitely way worse. I had a good time in college. Let's not get it twisted, but there that aspect of my life was extremely difficult. Especially, I was dealing with identity issues. Let's talk about the mixed identity and being not Asian enough, but also never being white, right? And being rejected by your supposed community because of your makeup, right? And I also would just like to say, like, yes, my dad is white, but he is wonderful. And probably my biggest flex is that my dad's not a creep. So, yeah. But yeah, my family is amazing. But so I'm very lucky in that sense. But I also will say that it's hard for mixed kids because it's hard to connect with both sides without feeling guilty sometimes. And there's a lot of self discovery that needs to be done on one's own. And yeah, exactly. It's hard. And that goes for like all mixed kids. It's not just, Asian and white. It especially difficult in um more polarized, right? Um so, I will say, like, for my full, or whatever you want to call it, to take into account that added struggle for our mixed people, um especially ones that uh it can erase, see, it's a theme, part of their identity. So with that